with us and our old friend Andrew. How you doing, Andrew? Welcome back.
Hey, nice to be back here.
Yeah,
Back in US, I'd say.
nice little background you have there. Where are you actually?
In one of our offices here in Austin. It's called the Farm Building. You can see the farm.
Uh, gotcha.
I bet
All
that's
right.
where the name came from, huh?
Oh yeah, it's very easy to remember. The Farm Building. Makes sense.
All right, cool. Well, it's good to have you back. I'm sure you have a lot of insights to share with us, and we're looking forward to hear a little bit more. So, we got some topics, I guess, coming up in the news, and we'll kind of just see where the conversation flows from there. So, right off the rip, I think a funny little thing that came from Tech Dirt was about the difficulties of having to buy a what do you call a dumb TV, and basically just goes on about how virtually impossible it is to find a dumb TV. You have to end up buying like digital signage for businesses. You can't find normal ones, and if you do find normal ones that are generally lower quality, a lot of people were suggesting buying computer monitors instead of TVs just to kind of circumvent it. But now, as we've seen, like with Apple's latest monitor, even monitors are getting smart. I saw a video on YouTube recently of like a Samsung monitor that's kind of like an all-in-one, and it has some apps like Netflix and stuff built into the monitor. And so I don't think it's really going away anytime soon. But did you guys see anything a little bit different about this, or things we kind of know about?
I'll tell you, it brought back memories from last year, one of our episodes, right? And there's a paragraph in the current article, and I'll just read it. Of course, it's challenging because TV manufacturers now make more money collecting and monetizing your personal data than they do selling the actual hardware. Last year, Vizio noted it made 38.4 million in one quarter just from tracking and monetizing consumer viewing and user usage data. It made 48.2 million on hardware.
Wow.
So they're they're not really selling TVs as much as they're just using the TV to sell, or to get access to your data so that they can sell that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean that
even go
that
ahead,
makes a
Andrew.
lot of sense. Yeah, because the numbers that you just mentioned are like super huge, given that they're investing more in collecting data and making sense out of data more than they do out of equipment. So that's bad news actually these days.
Yeah, just yesterday, here in the office that I'm in, down in South Texas, we got a new TV and we're setting it up real quick, and it was virtually impossible to get past like the Wi-Fi connection screen, and it'll ask you like six different times, do you want to cancel? It needs a somehow it knew it needed a firmware update without even connecting to the internet. It just defaulted to there's a firmware update, and then every time, probably for the first hour of setting up the TV, just getting like the picture settings and all that kind of stuff set up right, it would keep prompting back into connect to a Wi-Fi network for optimal settings or whatever it is. It was a Samsung TV, relatively new. And I think honestly, what ends up happening is kind of the uh, I don't think it was like a high end TV by any means. It was probably like a mid grade, mid to low end TV that we just threw in a conference room here. But uh, they're probably more aggressive on those, like especially ones that are probably deals and attract certain, like if you buy a $5,000 OLED TV, maybe it's not so aggressive in terms of signing up. But if you buy that discounted TV, the reason it's discounted is a lot of time because of this kind of what do you call dark patterns that end up being there with the TV. So not getting better anytime soon, I don't think. And what do you call it? Just not not good whatsoever.
Well, remember, like back in the day, when printers, people were selling. Well, they're still selling printers. Back in the day, we thought about printers, and you had the commercials like Shaq, and basically they were, for the most part, it felt like they were almost giving away the printer itself, the hardware, just so they could get you roped into buying the ink every month because that's where the real money was made.
Exactly.
Hmm.
This is like that on steroids because the money making kind of just ended with you buying the ink. Here it's like it's just getting started. We're getting you hooked in, we're getting your data, we're figuring all sorts of ways we can monetize your data. And so the ink is one thing. This is like, yeah, this could be endless. I don't know if we'll ever see, easily be able to buy a dumb TV or a dumb anything at certain points because the dumbness is where all the money is lost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That being smart these days, I think more than the TVs being smart, it is more about the companies being smart on their revenue models. So I think that's probably where the term came from. Smart TVs and smartphones. The companies are pretty smart in knowing how to generate business and generate revenue from that. So this reminds me of this incident that I often quote about when it comes to video privacy. So there was this big hotel chain back in India. So there was this German person who came to the hotel, who checked in. It's a 5-star hotel, pretty good, pretty grand all the way. So that this person came inside the hotel and was watching, I think, HBO or Netflix or something on the hotel TV. So he was doing that for about maybe like 2 or 3 hours on different genres, but predominantly it was on romantic films or something. So there was this waiter or this person who came to the door of his room and knocked and gave him a gift box and said, "Hope you have a pleasant stay" or something. So this German guest who was there at the hotel opened the box and saw a box of chocolate and flowers. This person was intrigued to the core because uh, he was really wondering why he got such kind of gift. He thought maybe that's a very common practice. So he just called up the reception, the front desk, and asked, "Why am I getting flowers and chocolates?" So that person on the desk, front desk, said that you have been watching romantic movies, right? So and we wanted to spice it up a bit. So and that person sued that hotel, and that went for crazy. It was on the news for a long time. So that's a good example of privacy invasion. People, the hotel knew because of their admin console or something to the subscription network, that they knew what type of, at least maybe, I don't know if they knew the name of the movies, but at least the genre that they're watching on, and they are trying to make it more interactive and lively, but ended up paying a huge fine for that, especially that person is from Germany. So you can imagine the GDPR and those kind of things kicking inside. So that's how they make money.
That's called customer experience, Andrew. You don't understand. That is the future.
Exactly, that's the word they quoted, but it's an invasion of privacy then.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think is there a privacy policy you sign when you book a hotel? Probably, actually. If
yeah,
a
we
major
do.
chain online, yeah, there is, right?
We do, yeah, for sure.
All right, well, that's not good. I do want to throw a question up real quick, back on the old topic of TVs before Andrew's crazy story here. What do you call it?
Really? Bob Saget?
I mean, could be a coincidence, could not be, could be from the grave, could not be, who knows. Anyways, is buying a Roku as a separate device a way to bypass the actual smart TV from collecting your data? I would tell you hard no, because the only thing different between the smart TV and the Roku is the Roku probably collects more data and is probably better at it, because Roku is an advertising company, not a device company.
Yeah,
By any stretch, their entire market is completely based on collecting every piece of data they want. That's actually one of the big problems they have with other vendors. So other streaming services on Roku's, they generally have a lot of these arguments. I think if everybody remembers, YouTube TV had a big thing with Roku. I think a little while ago, some sort of a dispute in negotiations because Roku wanted to collect the data that people were using inside of the YouTube TV app on the Roku, and Google was like, "No, that's our data. Only we should get that." And so they went back and forth. YouTube got pulled from a Roku for a while, and then eventually they came back and agreed on it, on basically sharing the data, I assume. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed on something. But Roku is definitely the world's, I don't want to say the world's worst, because the worst is probably those like shady Android boxes that you can probably buy online, but it's probably up there with one of the not so good media streaming devices. It's the reason why you can get like a 4K player for like $69 or something like that. It's supported by ads. If you want a recommendation, not affiliated, but Apple TV is ultimately the only way to really have some sort of private streaming, because every app is sandboxed to an extent, and you're only streaming. There's not a lot of like collection of data that happens. So if there's a privacy centric set top box, it's got to be Apple. And even then, I say that with a grain of salt, because every app is obviously collecting an insane amount of information on you when you watch it. So once you launch YouTube TV on the Apple TV, YouTube is still collecting a lot of information about you. Same thing if you open the HBO app or you open the Netflix app. They're all going to be collecting an insane amount of information. It's just This way, it's just the apps collecting the information who you've consented to with their privacy policy that hopefully you diligently read line by line as you signed up for their service. But ultimately,
That's a good one.
yeah. But at least the device itself is not collecting information on you. So that's a
Yeah.
long-winded way to answer that question. Roku
Well,
is
and to
not the way.
put it into a little bit of context, Vizio, we just said, made 38 million last quarter or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, when we did this last year, we did talk about Roku, and I
Mhm.
believe their quarterly revenue from ads was 500 million or so.
Wow.
So yeah, that's it. I think you're going from frying pan into fire if you go to the Roku route.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, Vizio is not even a TV company, right? I mean, it, it's
Hey,
a it's a
Yeah. So
it's a
being
data
in the
broker that
US,
happens to sell TVs.
yeah. So being in the US, there is this privacy act called as the Video Privacy Protection Act. So in case you're not aware of that, but it's high time that people start looking at that act and the regulators start working on that. That is because people don't realize that they have privacy when it comes to watching videos, and that's the reality because this act came up somewhere in 1980s, and it has undergone a couple of amendments as well. But yes, it still needs and deems a lot of amendments for the current day and age. So it's called as a VPPA, which is a Video Privacy Protection Act. So that actually controls the amount of information that the companies collect about a person viewing the media on their platform, and disclosure of that information or sharing it to other data brokers, advertisement companies, and whatnot. So that is an act that really requires a lot of amendment, given that Netflix and HBO and all these Hotstar and those kind of platforms are monetizing our data, basically our viewing history, our browsing habits. This act is a very good place that can actually make a lot of difference when it comes to regulating this space. It's already there, but it needs some pretty good amount of change. So probably when we get the chance to do that, we should probably talk more about the Video Privacy Protection Act and make that makes a lot of difference these days.
I got a question since you brought this up, and it's not just about the Netflixes of the world or YouTube, anything, any app that people use to view content. Just for example, like a Netflix. So you watch something, they know what you're watching, when you're watching, how much of it you're watching, all this stuff. Now, and that probably goes the same with YouTube and any of the other things. Now on YouTube, you have this function where you can delete your or your viewing history. Okay, so you hit that, and from your perspective, oh, now I'm not seeing all my stuff anymore. I guess that means it's gone forever. Is it? It's just gone for you, and they're still using it in the background to do whatever. Because I have a hard I just find it very suspicious that they would let this valuable asset, which is all of our behavioral and activity data, just go away because we hit a button that says I
Yeah,
delete
right.
my history.
I mean, that's a really good question because some things are an eyewash, right? So some things are a reality. So the reality is that in practice, from what I've seen or what I've heard, at least in this space, talking to many people in this forum, is that it is usually unpinned or basically unlinked to your account. So when you click the delete button, the data is unlinked, which means that when you again go and see what you have looked at, it's not going to pull that information because that query is no longer attached to your identifier. But in the background, I'm pretty sure that the data is pseudonymized or anonymized in a term that probably the identifiers are taken away, but the data still remains with them because that helps them to make a lot of planning on what content to put forth, what has been the most viewed content, what has been a problematic content, or what is not, what they thought they'd gain revenue from by streaming a particular movie or a particular channel, but they could not. So it's gonna make a lot of difference on their impact on their business as well. I'm pretty sure they don't completely do away with the data. This is what I think, and I think is true too.
There's no regulation on that. Like when you even like Google has the option to like clear browsing history. not just on Chrome, but like you log into your Google account and there's a way to delete previous searches and like map history. You're saying that there's no legal standing for what they actually have to do. It's kind of like a nice to have, or do you
Uh,
know like what the actual like I guess repercussions of it could be?
Well, basically, all these privacy laws or data protection or your right to privacy generally comes when it is associated with your account or your identity. And when you disassociate that, or when you remove the identifiers, like for example, your name or your account ID, your email address or your phone number from your browsing history or from your viewing history or anything of that sort, it is no longer regulated because they call it pseudonymous data. Pseudonymous data is, it's difficult to regulate that particular type of data, and anonymous data is obviously not part of personal data, which means you cannot identify a person, so it's no longer coming under the ambit of privacy regulations. So it's more of a good practice, maybe for in a technical sense. Having huge amount of data is going to take a toll on your servers, on your databases, so probably for cleaning that up, for maintenance, those kind of purposes, they'll delete that. But on an ongoing basis, as a regulated industry or regulated data, probably not, because it is already disassociated from your actual identification data. So that's how it goes.
But I would say like companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, when you're in a data, like if you're a data collection company, you're going to pay for the servers to store as much of that data as you possibly can. And then even, I mean, a lot of companies, I feel like in the rise of big data over the past like decade or so, it's collect as much as you can, whether you know what to do with it right now or not, we'll
Exactly.
figure that out. But just collect, 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 because you can't go back and collect old information. So you might as well store it and pay the premium to store it. Which is, I guess, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, some hardware fixed costs is kind of not that big in terms of once the monetization strategy comes around, which is how they all justify it, right?
Yeah, so during data collection, there's this principle of a collection limitation that is present in all privacy regulations. So, as long as the data is going to be associated with a person or a profile or a particular identifier, then that data should be collected less, like collect less data. That's exactly what the principle says. But you know what happens in practice. Collect
I mean,
all that you
collect
can.
less is just so vague. Like it doesn't even mean anything, right? It's like collect less of what? Like less relative to what? It
Yeah,
doesn't.
yeah.
It has no
It's
teeth.
like, what is the definition of is?
Yeah, try harder,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Speaking of data collection, I thought this was a pretty good one that came out. Brave made an announcement earlier this week about cutting out AMP websites. And so I think actually today or yesterday, DuckDuckGo announced for their browsers as well. They're doing something similar. And so basically, let me see if I can explain this well. Maybe one of y'all can correct me. But AMP sites are the world's most annoying internet invention, in my opinion. And basically, the way they work is you search for something, probably on Google, you click on a link. Oftentimes, it's to like news articles or any kind of news website, gossip sites, news sites, sports sites, stuff like that. And you click on the article from a Google search. The page will load instantly, extremely quickly. And it'll have this little bar at the top. But the website you're going to is not actually CNN.com or ESPN.com or whatever it is. It's actually a Google website, and you'll notice in the URL it generally says like amp.google.com / a bunch of crazy stuff. And so what Google does is it basically takes a bunch of these websites that have generally news content of just to I guess broadly categorize it, and they take a copy of all that data, they put it on like a mobile optimized version of a website that Google itself hosts, and this way, as a user, you're getting a very responsive mobile website, which was, I think, I don't want to say kind, but it was a service to people maybe 10 years ago when we were all on like 2G, 3G internet. But now everyone on their phones has blazing fast internet. Everybody is designing mobile friendly pages on their own. And so it's not necessary whatsoever. Generally, I would say it's more of the lazy websites that'll leverage AMP sites because you don't have to do anything yourself. It's just letting Google handle it. And in the end, ultimately, you're visiting a Google website. And so now any kind of data you've got from the original search query to the website you went on and how much time you spent on the page, what you scrolled on, what links you clicked on, everything about that interaction on that site is now tracked directly to Google. And that's obviously not a very good thing. So Brave came out with this thing. I'm pretty sure DuckDuckGo did, if I remember correctly. And basically, you can cut it out. Whenever Google tries to redirect you to an AMP site, it'll just go and redirect you to the normal website you're supposed to go on. In my opinion, this is probably the second best thing since sliced bread. But what do you guys think?
Didn't we just get done talking about data collection? I mean, isn't this just another way to collect more data?
Well, this is a way to stop it a little bit. I mean, at least Brave and DuckDuckGo are doing the right thing here.
No, I mean Google.
Yeah.
What they were doing was another way to collect data, and now it looks like Brave and maybe DuckDuckGo are letting folks get away from that collection that's been going on. I think that's a good thing. Just generally speaking, I'm not a website owner, but if I were, I would prefer the information not go to somebody else. It should go to if it's my content that's drawing them. I would prefer that they end up on my my website. That's just me. So I think hopefully that's a good thing. I know net. It seems like maybe it's a lose for Google, but I'm all right with that. I think if I'm just looking for information, I would prefer to go to the company that actually is giving it to me and not just somebody skimming it. That just feels like a foul move to me.
Yeah, I mean, Google has certain rules on that, on how to get a page into the AMP. It's accelerated mobile pages, and that's done through, let's say, caching. AMP caching is one of the technologies that is used to do that. And like they just rightly pointed out, so that was more important, like, let's say, like 3 or even 5 years ago, when we had about 2G or 3G on our mobile phones, and things were loading real slow at that time. But given that 5G and all these LTE and those kind of things are already there, and super fast Wi-Fi thanks to fiber optics and all of that, it probably doesn't make much sense, because I personally, when I do a Google search or a Brave search or DuckDuckGo search, I expect it to deliver the content what I want. Okay, Tejas, I got your point.
That was a really good cover. Andrew's like, when I do a Google search or a Brave search or a DuckDuckGo search, clearly he exposed himself a little bit there.
We have to give due credits to Google for at least their page ranking scheme. So that is very good. We get the right content, pretty much what we want, right? So in that way, it is good. But yeah, I don't expect page to be loading through an AMP portal, because it cuts out a lot of images. It cuts out a lot of beauty that page has to offer as well in a user's perspective, more than the privacy side. But in terms of privacy, you lose your privacy there, because like Brent said, it's just another way of collecting data, directing traffic to this particular Google hosted or Google cached or cached sites. So I think it's probably a thing of the past, and Brave is right on target, on point with that, trying to put things into the user's control again, so that the page loads with the way that the website owner wants that page to load. Because all these Google Analytics, not being illegal in the Europe and those kind of cases, and we go with like AMP pages, it's pretty much a matter of time till it just burns out, is what I also think.
Can I follow? I think it is important to say, back when maybe they came out with this AMP thing, maybe it was for the right intentions. Yeah, well, we want to get the people's the content they're looking for quicker. We can optimize it. 2G, 3G. There are issues there. So let's just say, yeah, that maybe that was the origin and the rationale, and it makes tons of sense. We don't need that anymore, right? I mean, I don't know anybody walking around, on a 2G anymore. Maybe there are places in the world that still have limited access by way of bandwidth, but let's just say in the US that's not an issue here. So if it's not an issue, and the reason that you did it is the reason is kind of dead now, because we're not worried about these things, why continue?
Exactly, that's a good point.
What do you call? Oh, I did remember. It's usually, I feel like it's always like local news websites that are the biggest AMP people for sure, because there's always, if you search for like maybe like weather or tornado and then a city or whatever's going on, it'll take you to like a local news site, like ABC 7 or Fox 22 or whatever it is in the States. And it's almost always an AMP site. And the most annoying thing about AMP sites, and the way you really figure out that you're on one, for people who are not paying that much close attention, is if you're like on your iPhone, let's say, and you're using Safari, and you go to an AMP site and you try to search it or share it. Sorry. So you tap the share icon, and let's say you want to text your friend the link or something like that. And when you text it, the URL that you're sending will be a Google URL. And then when you send it to them, it'll say like Google search for, and it'll have like whatever you search for, which could be embarrassing depending on what you search for. And in order to search or share the actual URL of the site itself, there's like a very small share icon in like the top right corner that they generally, I think, have to have. And you have to click on that, and then it shares the actual URL. So everyone's probably experienced it in some way, shape, or form. They probably don't even know how to get the real URL of the page that they're supposed to be visiting. But yeah, it's just not a good thing overall. And I think it's just, it's past its prime and not necessary anymore. And I think it's a good thing that these guys are trying to get rid of it. Let's see, what else do we got? Whole Foods stores in Austin, Texas to get Amazon One palm scan payment tech. It is the first region outside of Seattle where every Whole Foods market will offer Amazon One. I live in Austin. This is not cool. I also don't go to Whole Foods very much, so I don't really care personally. But what do you call it? I thought this little pet project would kind of just live and die with their small little Amazon Go stores, but clearly bigger ambitions. And the palm print is going to be the new biometric, which is...
It reminds me of the 666, to be honest.
What's the 666?
666 is sort of the
mark of the devil,
the mark of the beast. Yeah.
Okay. I thought there was like some kind of like privacy, like lingo.
No.
Like 666, some kind of.
No, the mark of the beast. So it is said in these last days, there will be this chip that will be implanted on your forehead or on your right hand or something, and you cannot buy or sell anything without that. Pretty much in our tech days, it's probably a chip the size of a rice cereal or something like that, rice grain or something. But having to wave in order to do that, that's fun, and it's terrifying as well for me. Yeah,
I'm not ready for that.
Neither am I.
No, not ready for that.
I mean, so we went from like normal payments to maybe Face ID to now palm print. I understand we're probably just going down a slippery slope. Where else can it go?
Remember that one story we did?
Oh, I know you remember, Brent. I know you remember.
I'm not going to bring that up.
For the true fans, they'll remember the story. For the other
Classic,
ones,
you mean?
All right, I can't talk about this anymore. This is crazy.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah. But yeah, Amazon will keep pushing this out. Once the palm thing is there, I think it's kind of weird. The palm is kind of just a speed bump to the actual cashierless journey that they're going for. So in the Amazon Go stores, you just pick something up, put it in your basket, and walk out, and you're charged automatically. You don't even need to do your palm. And so I find it kind of funny that the palm is what they're defaulting to, and they're not trying to test more with the contactless, let's call it, checkout system. But maybe this is just an easier implementation, and eventually it'll get there more. But ultimately, I mean, if you think about it, I guess, what does a palm print really get you? I mean, I don't know. Like, there's ways like you can use like browsing data and other things to figure out a profile and do it all. I'm not sure what a palm print does, but I also feel like people probably said that 15, 20 years ago, and eventually someone figured out a way that it could be valuable. So
I just don't. You walk around with your mobile device, or at least one of them. That's good enough for me. I don't leave the house without a phone. So I mean, as long as I got that, I don't need anything implanted in me. That's the way I'm looking at this.
Yeah. So are you wearing gloves next time you go to Whole Foods?
Right. I don't want to tell you who I am, so I'm going to put these gloves on. And
yeah, because in terms of security, at least, your thumb impression, your iris print, your voice gates, those kind of things are sensitive data according to privacy regulations also. And in terms of security, when you talk about authentication, so first is what you know, which is probably your name or email address or something like that. And second is what you got, which has got to be like your phone, your OTP devices, those kind of things. And the third method or the layer of authentication is what you have. So what you have is basically who you are. That's the right word to put. So who you are means it's your identity. So it's a way of authentication, but I don't know whether such kind of a secure procurement of goods in the local shop is going to make any difference at all. Because if you're going into sensitive data, you're going to a sensitive location, maybe your palm print, like for example in your passport cover, those kind of things, they are going to have your biometric, your palm scan, those kind of things, which is acceptable because they need to know who you are and those kind of things, verify your identity. But when it comes to purchasing something as a local grocery store, I don't know. I don't feel so good about it either.
Yeah, I'm just here to get a couple of cans of soup here.
Yeah, and then $40 later for 2 cans of soup, Brent, you'll have a seamless checkout experience at Whole Foods.
Yeah, maybe that's why I don't go to Whole Foods.
I mean, so wait, Andrew, I did have one question based on what you said. So you talked about this, what's classified as sensitive data versus other types of data, and even the last step of verification. So is that last step of verification? I know for like at least in the US, when you do certain like credit applications, they'll say like, have you lived at one of these 3 addresses in the past? And they'll like pull a bunch of old records and verify, or have you ever driven, which car of these have you driven, or what city were you born in? Like questions that they know the answers to, and you're verifying it that way. Is that also like just another level of verification that is becoming more prominent, or also regulated, or the credit agencies can kind of do whatever they want to here in the States, and that's how it works? Or do you have any idea on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are generally 4 layers of authentication when you talk about security. I'm not going to the privacy side for now, but when you talk about security, the first is something that which is the first thing, which is your name or email ID, something that you authenticate with, where you say that this is who I am. That's kind of the first one. Second is what you got. What you got is the OTP devices, those kind of things, your mobile phones or those kind of things. The third is going to be who you are, which is your identity, which as we just saw. And the fourth is where you are. That's the 4th layer of security, or the 4th layer of authentication. So, so long it was not a great thing. It was not a matter of importance, because probably if you cross the 2nd or the 3rd layer, pretty much you're proving a lot of things. Your identity, basically, everything is revealed there itself. But going the 4th layer of security or authentication simply means that they are core on making sure that this is right, and it is you, and there's no way that you can get out of. So it's basically sort of in a privacy perspective, it has to do with location tracking, more sensitive nature of data that is also being processed because of the 4th layer of security. So there's always this, I'd say a jumbling between security and privacy, and that is where these laws also sometimes get a bit too daunting or a bit confusing, because security regulations talk more about you have to authenticate, you have to verify, you have to authenticate, validate, verify, so many things. But on the other side, in contrast for that, the privacy regulation says don't collect more data, don't do this, balance it against what you're doing it against. So it's always at a confusing state, and that's why regulations sort of sometimes are difficult to understand, or regulators find a hard time in terms of the industry people in security versus the lawmakers. There's always some, so I wouldn't call it a conflict, but a lack of understanding or misunderstanding that always exists. But it's surprising to know that the 4th layer of security, which is the where you are or where you have been, is now predominantly being used. I mean, that's news for me, but it is one of the 4 layers of security of verification.
Yeah, that helps. I mean, where you are is pretty easy, I guess, right? I mean, most things are tracking your location nowadays, so that's a fairly simple one. I think a lot of people kind of just give up on.
Makes sense, yeah. Given that we are using our mobile phones and the keyword itself is mobile, so your location becomes more dominant, especially when you're accessing an account. It sends you an email that someone is accessing from another location. So that helps in that way. But yeah, I mean, it's a combination of all forces. And whether there are regulations, yes, there are. For regulating location data, there are small portions within the huge regulations themselves, not very specific ones for location tracking, but this app tracking, those kind of things are ways that they're trying to regulate in a technical sense as well.
And then speaking of regulation, I also saw, I don't know if you have a slide for it or not, but there was a ruling this week, I'm pretty sure by some judge somewhere, that was about scraping and the legality of it, basically, for websites. And so for a long time, I think Facebook had a big scraping lawsuit that went on maybe like 5-7 years ago. LinkedIn is going through a lot of different scraping websites. And the way scraping actually means, or what it does, is you'll have some sort of automated way of collecting information from a website. So imagine a LinkedIn scraper. You could look up your CRM, connect it to this scraping bot or something like that, and it'll pull in, all the information that you have in your public LinkedIn profile, even though that profile is public and anybody can access it. Is it legal or illegal to programmatically access that data and then categorize it, organize it, and then either sell it, reuse it, share it, whatever it is, right? And so I think the big debate was information could be in the public sphere, but does that mean it's for manual consumption versus programmatic or automated consumption and storage? And then who owns that data that was collected from the public internet? A lot of weird things about that. Facebook also had some stuff where people would create these, Facebook accounts. And once you have a Facebook account, you can, get information about other Facebook accounts by just searching for a name, and then you found their profile. And so you could scrape that and then store it all your Facebook friends and collect information on them, or people who aren't even your friends, just random Facebook users. And so a couple different things around scraping overall, but the judge struck it down and basically said scraping was okay. Did you guys see this or read a little bit more into what the actual ruling was?
Yeah, I definitely checked it out. They're actually, I don't want to name the company, but
Come on.
there was a pretty significant company locally here in Atlanta that really kind of made their business off of that. And then you remember this like 7 or 8 years ago that LinkedIn turned off their API to outsiders. Part of the reason was that.
Oh, because of scraping.
Yeah. But I guess the thing is, it's the data is publicly available, but it's not very usable unless you have a really easy way to aggregate it. And
I think they want their cake and eat it too, right? The companies put their data public, so they show up on like search engines and stuff like that. But then it's like, all right, cool. I want the search engine to see my site, but I don't want anyone else to basically see my site. I want the search engine to read the site content and use that content in order to uprank me, but I don't want anyone else to be able to do that, right? And it's just a game, right? Sorry to cut you off there. Finish your state.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, was that the first kind of rant of the year? I don't know.
Not quite.
We're getting up. We're moving in that direction. No, but I think maybe these companies are saying, yeah, we want the data out there because that brings us, traffic and all. But they don't like it when they don't have control over how that data is used, And so if a third-party company finds a way to aggregate all this publicly available data, and those folks didn't do it, and they don't have power over how it's how it's delivered, distributed, people can pay for it. That's the issue. It's not a data issue at all. Apparently, it's more of a power issue and an ability to monetize it and not have any say in that other than trying to buy the company, which they definitely don't want to do. So yeah, I think this is way more than just, oh, it's public data. We should have. I think the line that LinkedIn used was, we're looking out for our users because, yeah, right. The data's already out there anyway. This is all about, why didn't we think about that, or something to that effect?
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about public data, generally it is of the opinion that the data is meant for public use. It is meant for a public consumption, right? So it makes a lot of sense. And Brent's point is that's a very good perspective, because it's more about protecting users, more in terms of a business sort of a control or a power or an authority over the data, more than the privacy aspect. But another perspective that I think is that there are these privacy regulations also. For example, the GDPR, or could be the Brazilian law, the South African law, or even the Singapore law, I believe. I'm not really sure on that. They talk about public data as a separate topic altogether, because they talk about data that is collected directly, indirectly, public records, which is like from the government, the tax records, those kind of things, and public records. So that's a specific the point of interest in these privacy regulations, and they talk about public records. So not many laws have that, but there are a few that specifically talk. I'm not really sure why they are so interested in public data. I'm not talking about public records, but public data itself, data that is made manifestly public by a person. Could be through your LinkedIn profile or a blog spot that you own or something that you want the data to be public. So that being scraped and scrapped or whatever and being used by another company, well, it's more of a competition issues, like you rightly pointed out. So it is an interesting space, and at least in the EU, I know for sure that it is still illegal. For in the US, this ruling has brought about a change in thought about that or rethinking that. But I don't know. I've done a Google search again, and I found out that my name. If I just type my full name, I'm quite a unique name in my full all these 4 words that I have in my name, right? So if you just do a Google search on that, it's going to list many things where I never thought my name was going to be public. Probably because, for example, this Twitter that we do, that's acceptable. I totally understand that. But just from my LinkedIn profile or the information that is made public because I wanted to, there are about 6 to 7 companies that have consumed the data, and they put stars on the data, or they mask it, and they're trying to monetize that as well. So I don't know. It's a very slippery slope. I think I don't find real practical use of that data. These headhunting companies or these lead generation companies and all, they make a lot of that through that, and they monetize on that. The data is from a network for a good purpose. I want the data to be public because I want people to probably look at my profile on a good thing, like for example, a professional network such as LinkedIn. But that being monetized to sell another product to me, which probably I'm not interested in, or to another company, well, I don't feel really comfortable about that. But this ruling, I don't know. I have an unbalanced opinion on that, I'd say, because I do concur that it is good that data is being scraped and it is legal, but I also am not very confident on a long term, because my data is anyway that I want it to be public, but is now being it can be public again, but not at the cost or not being monetized by another company. I'm not so convenient with that either.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction too. The monetization aspect is where it really goes bad very quickly, right? Because like if I build a scraper for a site, collect a bunch of data, and then resell it as if it's my own original data, then that's problematic, right? And that's kind of probably where the heart of a lot of it is, because a lot of companies do make money off API access and programmatic access to information, and if they sacrifice that for scraping and someone else taking that data and reselling and making money off their stuff, that obviously doesn't seem right either. So yeah, I agree. It's a fairly nuanced take that has to be there, but I guess eventually we'll kind of see where it ends up and how it kind of flows around, because there's also public data. Like, I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's got to be like a couple months ago, maybe, Twitter has kind of introduced this new thing where if you're not signed into Twitter and you click on a Twitter link, it'll start it's like very aggressive about the pop-ups to make you sign in or create an account in order to see the public tweet that technically people should be able to see on their own. Reddit on mobile has been like pretty notorious for this. So anytime you click a Reddit link on mobile and you open the browser, it will very aggressively tell you download the Reddit app and view the post in the application. And so all these sites, I think, are coming up with that. And it's a little bit tangential from scraping, but it's kind of a similar concept where this public content, they really want to drive the usage and the engagement in their apps or in their areas where they can either further monetize or further analyze usage patterns and behaviors and trends and all sorts of stuff like that. So a lot of ways it could go, but I guess this is just the first step, and we'll kind of see where it kind of evolves from here.
Yeah, when we talk about regulations, right, I just mentioning that some laws have specific pointers on that. Another thing, the right to access is one of the rights that many of these privacy laws provide. And one of the points or one of the data that corporates or controllers or data brokers or whoever is processing your data, and you raise your right of access to them, asking them what data you have about me on your system. So that is this one additional information they're supposed to give you, which is the source of the data. Like, where did you get the data from? So probably through a data aggregation tool, or on your own through scraping, or through a correct or a legit or through some other means. So probably you got it in a trade show, those kind of things, or you got it out of LinkedIn by your normal search, your public search engine searching methods, or through an integration or an API integration with another data collection company, or through scraping. It could be whatever it means, but you're supposed to disclose that when a person exercises the right to access. So I think that sort of finds a balance in itself, because though we have different opinions on data scraping, but at least when a person exercises the right to access, you're pretty much telling them where you got the data from. I think so that sort of makes sense to me.
Doesn't that assume that the source is understandable? If the source is some shell company that's a shell company of another one that happens to do the scraping, and you have no idea who the actual, it's like Data Inc. or something like that, and you have no idea what it is, its source can be manipulated as well. And I feel like people get very creative in a lot of different ways.
No, everything cannot be regulated, and the space.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. All right. Well, I mean, we're getting close on time here, so I just want to wrap up a little bit. Brandrew, always a pleasure having you. Hopefully, we can have you for some more talks and deeper dives into more technical regulation and privacy topics around the states and around the world. And good to see you, Brent, as always. And I think we'll just call it a day here.
Yeah,
I had to do the
tip of the hat to you too,
hat.
Brent. Tip
Brand
of
new
the
hat, by the
you.
way, just for you. Tim.
I'll do mine, namaskar as well. Have a nice day.
All right, and that's pretty much it. Adios, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.